The story of Africa is older than stone, older than the rivers that carve its valleys, older than the forests that still whisper with secrets. And yet, when most people think of civilization, they imagine Mesopotamia, Greece, Rome, or China. The great kingdoms of Africa are often pushed to the shadows, remembered only in fragments or footnotes. But what if some of the world's most astonishing civilizations thrived on African soil, then vanished into dust, leaving behind ruins so enigmatic that even today historians argue about their origins? The deserts, jungles, and savannas of Africa hide scars of forgotten empires. Some are buried beneath shifting sands, others swallowed by forests, and some still stand in silent defiance, their walls refusing to yield their secrets. These are the civilizations history tried to forget, kingdoms that rose with brilliance, ruled with power, then slipped into legend. One of the first that jolts scholars into silence is Nauka, a culture older than the Roman Empire, hidden for centuries beneath Nigeria's earth. Discovered by accident in the 20th century when miners unearthed strange terracotta heads, the Nok left behind haunting statues with piercing eyes and stylized features. Their artistry suggested a society complex and advanced, yet almost nothing is known about them. Who were these people? How did they create such refined art as early as 1000 BCE? Some scholars believe they may have laid the foundations for later West African kingdoms, while others whisper of influences from far beyond Africa, theories as wild as lost travelers from the Mediterranean or even Atlantis itself. Then there is Great Zimbabwe, whose name still sparks debate. Rising in the heart of southern Africa between the 11th and 15th centuries, it was a city of stone towers, circular enclosures, and walls so massive they seemed impossible without modern tools. At its height, Great Zimbabwe was the capital of a vast trading empire dealing in gold, ivory, and glass beads that came all the way from Asia. And yet, when European explorers stumbled upon its ruins centuries later, they refused to believe Africans could have built it. They invented myths of wandering Phoenicians or lost Israelites. Only in recent decades has the truth been reclaimed that Great Zimbabwe was the creation of African genius, a monument to ambition and resilience. But Zimbabwe is not alone. Across the Sahel, buried in the sands of Mali and Niger, lie the remnants of kingdoms whose libraries once rivaled Alexandria. Timbuktu, often dismissed as a metaphor for remoteness, was in reality a beacon of knowledge. Its scholars copied manuscripts by hand, filling thousands of volumes on mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. Some of those texts survive today, hidden in secret family collections, fragile pages that hint at a forgotten intellectual golden age. How many discoveries were made there, centuries before Europe's Renaissance, only to vanish when invaders burned and looted? Yet the most mysterious ruins lie far from the bustling trade routes. Deep in the deserts of Sudan rise the pyramids of Kush, smaller than Egypt's, but more numerous, built by kings who once conquered the Nile. The Kushites even ruled as pharaohs during Egypt's 25th dynasty, their black granite statues still towering in museums today. But beyond those records, shadows remain. Who guided the construction of hundreds of pyramids at Meroe? Why did the civilization collapse so suddenly, leaving their temples silent in the desert wind? Some believe drought strangled their lifeline, others whisper of wars erased from memory. Archaeologists keep digging, but for every answer, more questions rise. In Ethiopia, the stelae of Axum thrust skyward, carved monoliths that stand as silent giants. Once rulers of an empire that traded with Rome, Persia, and India, the Axumites even minted coins and embraced Christianity centuries before much of Europe. Yet their empire faded into obscurity, and to this day, the exact reason remains uncertain. Was it climate change, shifting trade, or something far darker? Africa's forgotten civilizations leave behind more than stone, they leave echoes. Songs, legends, and oral histories tell of cities swallowed whole by the earth, of empires that rose in glory and fell in fire. Modern historians dismiss some as myths, but every so often, a discovery proves the legends true. Terracotta heads in Nigeria, golden manuscripts in Mali, stone palaces in Zimbabwe. Each one a fragment of a grand puzzle that, if pieced together, could rewrite the very definition of civilization. Africa was never a dark continent. It was a continent of fire and brilliance, its kingdoms radiant, its people ingenious. What is dark is the shadow cast by history itself, the silence of centuries that erased these civilizations from global memory. And yet, the ruins remain, stubborn reminders carved into stone. The story is not lost, it is only waiting to be told. And as archaeologists push deeper into jungles, deserts, and riverbeds, they keep asking the same question: how many more kingdoms has history tried to bury? If Chapter 1 revealed the broad sweep of Africa's forgotten kingdoms, Chapter 2 draws us closer into the heart of mysteries where stone walls, manuscripts, and oral traditions whisper of empires that rose with brilliance, only to vanish without leaving a clear trail. To explore them is to walk through shadows of power, wealth, and knowledge that rivaled any civilization of the ancient world. Let us begin with Timbuktu, a name that outsiders once used to mock remoteness, yet which was once the intellectual capital of Africa. During the 14th and 15th centuries, Timbuktu stood at the crossroads of trans-Saharan trade, where caravans of camels carried salt from the north and gold from the south. At its height, it was not merely a trading city, it was a university town. The fabled Sankore University drew thousands of students, its scholars producing and collecting manuscripts that covered astronomy, medicine, mathematics, poetry, and law. Families in Timbuktu still guard these texts today, sometimes hidden in wooden chests beneath sand floors. What is shocking is not that these works exist, but that they have been ignored by mainstream history for centuries. Could it be that Timbuktu's golden age preserved knowledge lost to Europe during the Middle Ages? Some researchers believe so. Further east, in present-day Sudan, lies the legacy of Kush, a kingdom often overshadowed by Egypt but equally enigmatic. The Kushites built hundreds of pyramids at Meroe, far more than the Egyptians ever did, though smaller in scale. These pyramids once stood above bustling cities, their interiors decorated with symbols that scholars still struggle to decode. In the 8th century BCE, Kushite rulers even conquered Egypt itself, founding the 25th dynasty and ruling as pharaohs. Statues of these kings, with strong Nubian features carved into black granite, show a people proud and powerful. Yet the civilization collapsed mysteriously around 350 CE. Some argue environmental change turned fertile lands to desert. Others suspect rival kingdoms destroyed them. But the truth remains buried beneath dunes. To the south, in Ethiopia, another giant rose, the kingdom of Aksum. By the 1st century CE, Aksum was already trading with Rome, Persia, and India. It minted its own coins, bronze, silver, and gold, bearing inscriptions in Ge'ez, one of the world's oldest written languages still in use. Aksum's stelae, towering monoliths carved from single blocks of stone, remain among the largest megaliths ever erected, some weighing more than 500 tons. What machines or methods could have raised them is a mystery still unsolved. Aksum converted to Christianity in the 4th century, centuries before much of Europe, making it one of the earliest Christian kingdoms in the world. Yet by the 7th century, it faded from prominence. Historians blame the shift in trade routes after the rise of Islam, but local legends suggest something stranger. A punishment from heaven, or even a voluntary retreat into secrecy, guarding relics that outsiders were never meant to see. In southern Africa, the ruins of Great Zimbabwe tower as silent witnesses to lost grandeur. Stone walls stretch without mortar, some rising more than 30 feet, encircling areas once filled with life. Archaeologists found evidence of gold, ivory, and glass beads from India and China, proof of international trade long before Europeans reached African shores. And yet, when colonial explorers first stumbled upon Great Zimbabwe, they refused to believe Africans had built it. They wove myths of wandering Phoenicians or even the Queen of Sheba. It was only after decades of denial that scholars admitted the truth. Great Zimbabwe was the heart of an African empire, home to tens of thousands of people, flourishing between the 11th and 15th centuries. Why it collapsed remains unsolved. Some say overgrazing and famine. Others whisper of civil wars. The ruins, however, stand firm, defiant against both time and prejudice. But perhaps most haunting are the civilizations that left behind almost nothing. Just fragments of pottery, traces of fortresses, or oral traditions that hint at entire empires erased. In Nigeria, the Nok culture remains an enigma. Their terracotta sculptures, with elongated faces and haunting eyes, date back more than 500 years. They vanish from the record around 500 CE, leaving scholars to wonder whether drought, migration, or invaders scattered them. Did they evolve into later West African kingdoms like Ife or Benin? Or were they completely lost to time? Every discovery seems to raise the same question: how many more forgotten civilizations lie hidden beneath the sands, the forests, or the waters of Africa? Satellite imaging has revealed unexplored ruins across the Sahara, suggesting that vast cities may once have thrived where there is now only desert. Oral traditions speak of kingdoms swallowed whole by shifting earth or drowned beneath rising rivers. The soil is heavy with history, waiting to be uncovered. What unites these civilizations? Nok Kush, Assam, Great Zimbabwe, and Timbuktu is not only their brilliance, but the silence that followed them. Each collapsed, was erased, or was deliberately forgotten by those who wrote the dominant histories. But their stones, statues, manuscripts, and legends endure, whispering that the history of Africa is not a blank space, but a tapestry of genius that the world is only beginning to rediscover. And if these are the civilizations we know of, how many more still lie buried, waiting for the day the earth gives them back? Chapter 3. By the time the 20th century dawned, explorers and archaeologists had already begun piecing together fragments of Africa's great civilizations. Yet with every discovery, new questions emerged, and with them myths of entire kingdoms that seemed to straddle the line between legend and reality. Chapter 3 takes us deeper into those mysteries. Civilizations spoken of in whispers, described in travelers' accounts, or remembered only in oral traditions, their ruins half buried and their stories fading. One of the most haunting of these is the tale of the Garamantes, a kingdom that thrived in what is now the Libyan desert. To stand in the Sahara today is to face an endless expanse of heat and emptiness. Yet the Garamantes built cities there almost 2,000 years ago. They dug underground irrigation channels, fogaras, that carried water from hidden aquifers, allowing them to grow crops in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Roman records describe them as fierce desert raiders mounted on chariots, who defied even the legions. But when their water sources dried up, the Garamantes vanished. All that remains today are ruins of stone walls and the silent channels of their fogaras snaking through the desert like veins of a body long dead. Were they destroyed by drought alone, or did some greater force erase them? The silence of their cities is unsettling. Further south, in the dense forests of West Africa, lie ruins and legends of civilizations that flourished yet left little behind. Oral traditions speak of a kingdom called Zanja, a coastal empire that stretched along East Africa and traded across the Indian Ocean. Arab merchants recorded their voyages there, describing markets filled with ivory, iron, and slaves. But what became of the Zanj? Their story dissolves into fragments, absorbed into the rise of Swahili city, states like Kilwa and Zanzibar. Perhaps the Zanji never vanished at all. Perhaps they simply evolved, their identity hidden under new names. Equally mysterious is the kingdom of Mapungabwe, hidden in the hills of South Africa. Before Great Zimbabwe rose to prominence, Mapungabwe was already thriving, a center of gold trade in the 11th and 12th centuries. Its rulers were buried with ornaments of beaten gold, including a tiny yet exquisite figurine of a rhinoceros, proof of wealth and artistry unmatched in its time. But by the 14th century, Mapungubwe had collapsed, abandoned for reasons that remain unclear. Some argue climate change forced its people north toward Zimbabwe. Others whisper of plague war or political upheaval erased from record. Whatever the truth, Mapungubwe stands as proof that southern Africa's kingdoms were not isolated, but part of vast networks that reached as far as China and the Middle East. And then there is the enigma of Djenne in modern Mali, one of the oldest known cities in sub-Saharan Africa. Founded as early as 250 BCE, Djenne grew into a bustling urban center with tens of thousands of people. Archaeologists uncovered distinctive pottery, iron tools, and evidence of social complexity. But unlike many civilizations, Djenne seemed to thrive without kings or monumental palaces. Its people built with mud and clay, shaping an urban culture that endured for centuries. When the city was finally abandoned around 1400 CE, it left behind no clear record of why. Today, the modern city of Djenne, famous for its grand mosque, sits nearby, but the ancient ruins remain a mystery. Legends carry us even deeper. Ethiopian folklore speaks of the land of Punt, a place mentioned in Egyptian inscriptions as early as 2500 BCE. Pharaohs sent expeditions to Punt, returning with gold, incense, and exotic animals. But historians cannot agree on its location. Some place it in modern Somalia, others in Eritrea or Yemen. Was Punt a single kingdom or a network of wealthy city-states trading across the Red Sea? Its disappearance is as baffling as its existence, vanishing from records as if swallowed by time. Even darker mysteries linger in stories of cities swallowed whole. West African griots tell of kingdoms buried by the sands, swallowed by divine punishment or by shifting climates. One tale describes a golden city hidden beneath the Sahara, its towers still gleaming under the dunes. Satellite imagery in recent years has revealed faint traces of ancient riverbeds and rectangular structures hidden under the desert sands, suggesting that perhaps the legends hold some truth. What unites all these stories? The garment is Zanji, Mapungubwe, Djenne, and Punt, is not just their brilliance but their vanishing. Some fell to drought, others to shifting trade, still others to wars unrecorded. But in each case, the silence that followed was total. Their ruins whisper of greatness, but their voices have been smothered by centuries of neglect. Historians often say that civilizations die when their memory dies. Yet Africa's lost kingdoms are not truly gone. They live in fragments, in ruins half buried in sand, in songs carried by griots, in manuscripts tucked into desert libraries. Each rediscovery forces us to ask the same question: if so much has already been forgotten, what else remains hidden? How many more cities, waiting beneath jungle roots or desert dunes, will one day rise from the earth to remind us that Africa's story was never one of silence, but of empires that once lit the world? Chapter 4. The eastern coastline of Africa stretches for thousands of miles, and for centuries it was not an empty shore, but a glittering chain of cities, cosmopolitan centers where merchants from Arabia, India, Persia, and even China mingled with African rulers and traders. This was the world of the Swahili Coast city-states, a civilization built not upon vast inland empires but upon the sea, tides, and trade winds. Today, many of these once thriving cities are ruins overgrown by vines, but in their day, they were among the wealthiest and most sophisticated urban centers in the world. From the 9th century onward, towns like Kilwa, Kisiwani, Mombasa, Zanzibar, Malindi, and Sofala rose along the coast, each competing for dominance. Kilwa in particular became legendary. Built of coral stone and lime, its mosques and palaces rivaled those of Arabia. The Great Mosque of Kilwa, one of the oldest standing mosques on the continent, still endures, its domes echoing with the prayers of traders long gone. Kilwa's rulers grew rich, controlling the trade of gold from the Zimbabwe plateau, ivory from the forests, and slaves destined for foreign markets. So powerful was Kilwa that even Ibn Battuta, the great Moroccan traveler, praised it in the 14th century as one of the most beautiful cities he had ever seen. Yet the Swahili coast was more than commerce. It was culture. The fusion of African and Arab traditions gave birth to the Swahili language, written in Arabic script, still spoken by millions today. Poetry, music, and architecture blended in ways that defied categories, creating a civilization that belonged to no single region but to the Indian Ocean world itself. Traders carried Chinese porcelain, Indian cotton, and Arabian glass to these shores, and in return they took back African gold, timber, spices, and ivory. Archaeologists still find shards of Ming Dynasty ceramics in ruined Swahili houses, proof that these cities were connected to worlds thousands of miles away. But prosperity brought vulnerability. The city-states were wealthy but fragmented, each vying for influence, rarely uniting. When Portuguese explorers arrived at the end of the 15th century, drawn by rumors of gold and riches, the Swahili cities were caught off guard. Vasco da Gama's cannons battered their coral walls, and, within decades, the Portuguese imposed control over much of the coastline. Kilwa fell, Zanzibar was seized, and the proud network of city-states fractured. What had once been hubs of global trade sank into decline, their palaces left to crumble under sea winds. The ruins that remain today are haunting reminders. Kilwa Kisiwani, now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, lies abandoned, its once glorious palace, the Husuni Kubwa, reduced to empty stone chambers that echo only with the sound of waves. At Jetty in Kenya, forest roots snake through the remnants of mosques, houses, and tombs, as if nature itself is reclaiming the city. These ghost towns remind us that Africa's lost civilizations were not only inland empires of stone and desert, but also vibrant maritime societies that connected continents long before the age of European exploration. Legends linger as well. In Zanzibar, stories are still told of ships laden with gold and emeralds that never returned, swallowed by storms or by the ocean itself. On the mainland, oral traditions recall rulers who commanded fleets so large they darkened the horizon, their sails carrying the symbol of the crescent moon. Though archaeology confirms much of the Swahili coast's prosperity, countless details remain unknown. Who exactly controlled the wealth? How did these cities organize themselves politically? And what secrets lie buried beneath the sands of their ruined ports? What is clear is that the Swahili city-states were not isolated, primitive villages as colonial narratives once claimed. They were cosmopolitan powers, trading on equal terms with Arabia, India, and even China. Their decline was not because of weakness, but because of the arrival of European naval warfare, a force their coral walls and wooden ships could not withstand. And yet, just like Great Zimbabwe, just like Axum, the ruins of Kilwa, Getty, and Sofala stand in silence, refusing to be erased. They tell us that Africa's history was not one of isolation, but of global connection. For centuries, the Indian Ocean was Africa's highway, carrying ideas, goods, and cultures that shaped civilizations now largely forgotten. The story of the Swahili coast is both inspiring and tragic. Inspiring, because it proves that Africa was always part of the world stage. Tragic, because its brilliance was dimmed too early, leaving only fragments. But perhaps the real tragedy is how little the world remembers. When we think of great maritime powers, we recall Venice, Carthage, or Portugal. Few recall Kilwa. Few remember that once, on Africa's shores, coral palaces gleamed and ships carried treasures that stunned even the greatest travelers. And so the ruins wait, whispering their story to the sea breeze until the world is ready to listen again. Chapter 5. Deep within Africa's interior, away from the coral coasts and desert empires, other kingdoms rose with grandeur so dazzling that their names still echo in half, remembered songs, and faded manuscripts. These were not minor chiefdoms but vast empires, wealthy beyond imagination, with armies, courts, and treasures that stunned travelers who were fortunate enough to witness them. Yet many of these civilizations are today remembered only in fragments. Their palaces lie in ruins, their bronzes scattered in museums, their libraries hidden or destroyed. Among the most famous is the Mali Empire, which flourished from the 13th to the 16th centuries. At its height, Mali controlled a territory larger than Western Europe. Its wealth flowed from gold, so much gold that when Emperor Mansa Musa journeyed to Mecca in 1324, his caravan of 60,000 men and hundreds of camels carried so much of it that the value of gold across the Middle East collapsed for years. Yet Mali was not merely wealthy, it was cultured. Timbuktu, within its borders, became the intellectual heart of Africa, home to thousands of manuscripts. European maps of the era even depicted a golden king in the center of Africa, holding a shining orb, a tribute to Mansa Musa's legendary riches. But how did such a magnificent empire fall? Civil war, invaders, and shifting trade routes eroded its power until it splintered, leaving behind only the legends of a golden age. To the east, the kingdom of Benin thrived in what is now Nigeria. Founded around the 11th century, Benin became a powerhouse of trade and artistry. Its people were master bronze casters, producing lifelike plaques and sculptures so sophisticated that when Europeans first saw them, they refused to believe Africans could have created them. The city of Benin itself was surrounded by massive earthworks, walls and moats that stretched for thousands of kilometers, greater in scale than the Great Wall of China when measured by volume. Portuguese traders who arrived in the 15th century marveled at its grandeur, calling it one of the most organized and beautiful cities they had ever seen. But in 1897, British forces sacked Benin, burning the city and looting thousands of bronzes that today sit in European museums. The kingdom collapsed under colonial violence, its memory deliberately erased, its art labeled as too advanced to be African. Only now is its legacy being slowly reclaimed. Further west, in the forests of present-day Ghana, the Ashanti Empire rose during the 17th century. Known for their fierce warriors and dazzling gold regalia, the Ashanti resisted colonial domination for centuries. Their golden stools, masks, and ceremonial swords symbolized power and spirituality, while their oral traditions preserved a history of valor and resistance. Yet their story is often told only in the shadow of their clashes with the British, rather than in the brilliance of their governance, artistry, and diplomacy. The Ashanti kings held courts filled with pageantry, their palaces glittering with treasures that rivals compared to the wealth of Europe. Even older than Mali or Benin, the Kingdom of Ghana, not to be confused with the modern nation, ruled West Africa between the 6th and 13th centuries. Known as the Land of Gold,